5-year-old Emma was planting flowers for her deployed daddy when HOA President Margaret dragged her to a hole and began burying her alive, screaming, "This will teach you respect." Emma's terrified cries echoed through the neighborhood until a voice thundered, "Get away from my daughter." Her Navy SEAL father had returned. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun painted golden streaks across our quiet suburban street when my world almost ended. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how one cruel woman nearly destroyed my family, and how my husband's past caught up with her in ways she never imagined. My 5-year-old daughter Emma was everything pure and innocent in this world. With her bright blue eyes and golden curls that bounced when she laughed, she had this magical way of making everyone smile. Emma had a heart bigger than her tiny body, always sharing her toys with neighborhood kids and leaving drawings for the mailman. She would spend hours talking to butterflies in our garden, convinced they understood every word she said. That Tuesday morning she skipped outside to play in our small front garden, her tiny hands clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hopscotch. The rabbit was worn from countless adventures, missing one button eye, but to Emma he was perfect. She had rescued him from a garage sale 2 years ago, declaring that he needed a home where he would be loved forever. "Mommy, can I plant some flowers for Daddy when he comes home?" she asked, her voice sweet as honey. My husband Jake had been deployed for 8 months. Emma missed him terribly, though she didn't fully understand why Daddy had to be away for so long. Every night, she would kiss his photo goodnight and tell him about her day, as if he could hear her across the ocean. She had made him a counting chain with 200 colorful paper rings, tearing one off each morning until Daddy would come home. Only 12 rings remained. I never told her that Jake wasn't just any soldier, he was a Navy SEAL, one of the most elite warriors in the world. His unit had completed missions that would never be declassified, had saved lives in ways the public would never know. The man who could eliminate enemies with deadly precision was the same man who would spend hours braiding Emma's hair and teaching her to skip stones at the lake. To Emma, he was simply her hero who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character and made pancakes shaped like butterflies every Sunday morning. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, watching her through the kitchen window as she carefully dug a small hole with her plastic shovel. That's when Margaret Thornfield appeared. Margaret was our HOA president, a bitter woman in her 60s who seemed to find joy in making others miserable. She had perfectly styled gray hair that never moved even in strong wind, always wore expensive suits that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and carried herself like she owned the entire neighborhood. Her mansion sat at the end of our street, surrounded by pristine landscaping that she measured with a ruler to ensure every blade of grass was exactly the same height. Margaret's cold eyes had never shown warmth, not even when greeting a child. She had been widowed 5 years ago, and instead of finding comfort in community, she had grown increasingly bitter and controlling. She issued violation notices for Christmas decorations that stayed up past January 2nd, for garbage cans that were visible from the street for more than 6 hours, and for children's chalk drawings on sidewalks. The neighborhood kids instinctively crossed the street when they saw her coming, sensing the darkness that seemed to follow her everywhere. Her own children rarely visited anymore, and when they did, the conversations were brief and cold. Margaret had driven away everyone who had ever tried to love her, leaving her with nothing but rules and regulations to fill the emptiness in her heart. "What is that little brat doing to my property?" Margaret's shrill voice cut through the peaceful morning. I rushed outside to find her towering over Emma, who had frozen in fear, clutching Mr. Hopscotch tightly. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice steady despite my rising anger. "Your daughter is destroying neighborhood property. Look at this mess." Margaret pointed at the tiny hole Emma had dug, which was barely 6 inches wide and completely within our property line. "She's playing in our own yard, Margaret. She's not bothering anyone." Margaret's face twisted with rage. "Don't you dare use that tone with me. I am the HOA president, and I will not tolerate this disrespect. That child needs to learn discipline." Emma began to cry, her small body trembling with fear, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. "Please don't yell at my mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she held Mr. Hopscotch tighter. "She's nice. She makes cookies for everyone." The innocence in her voice should have melted even the coldest heart, but Margaret's expression only grew more vicious. "Shut up, you little pest," Margaret screamed, her face turning an alarming shade of red. "Children should be seen and not heard. Your mother has clearly failed to teach you proper respect." Emma flinched as if she had been slapped, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to be bad." And that's when something inside me snapped completely. No one, absolutely no one, would speak to my daughter that way. Don't you ever speak to my daughter that way. I stepped protectively in front of Emma. Margaret's eyes gleamed with malicious intent. Oh, you want to protect your precious little angel? Let me show you what happens to children who don't follow rules. Before I could react, Margaret grabbed Emma's tiny arm with a grip that would leave bruises and dragged her toward the small hole. Emma's scream of pain and terror pierced the morning air, a sound that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. No. Let go of her. I screamed, lunging forward, but Margaret's fury had given her inhuman strength. Since your daughter likes digging so much, let's see how she likes being buried. Margaret's voice had become something demonic, filled with a hatred that seemed impossible for one human being to contain. Emma's terrified screams reached a pitch that made dogs howl throughout the neighborhood. Mommy? Help me. I can't breathe. I want my daddy. I fought desperately to reach my daughter, clawing at Margaret's hands, but she had somehow summoned two of her cronies, Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Hendricks from the HOA board, who grabbed my arms and held me back. These people I had once considered neighbors were now complicit in my daughter's torture. This is insane. You're going to kill her. I sobbed, my voice breaking as I watched helplessly. Neighbors were starting to gather, some filming with their phones, others calling 911, but too many were too shocked to move. Mrs. Chun from next door was crying openly, while old Mr. Rodriguez was shouting at Margaret to stop. But Margaret seemed to have entered some kind of psychotic break, fueled by years of bitterness and hatred. Maybe this will teach both of you some respect, Margaret sneered, continuing to shovel dirt over Emma's small body. Maybe this will show the entire neighborhood what happens when you cross me. Emma's cries grew weaker as the dirt covered her legs, then her waist, then her chest. Only her beautiful face was visible now, streaked with tears and dirt, her blue eyes wide with terror. Daddy? I want my daddy. Please, I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. The sight of my baby girl disappearing under the earth was the most horrifying thing I had ever witnessed. This wasn't just cruelty. This was pure evil, the kind of darkness that most people never encounter in their entire lives. Just when I thought I would lose my precious daughter forever, a voice cut through the chaos like thunder. Get away from my daughter. Jake stood at the edge of our driveway, still in his military uniform, his duffel bag dropped beside him like it weighed nothing. He had taken the first flight home to surprise us for Emma's birthday next week, but instead walked into our worst nightmare. His face was a mask of deadly calm that I recognized from the few times he had told me about his missions. This was the face he wore when lives were on the line. The look in his eyes was unlike anything I had ever seen, and I had been married to him for 8 years. This wasn't just an angry father. This was a trained killer whose child was in mortal danger. Every muscle in his body was coiled like a spring, ready to unleash the full extent of his training. Margaret looked up from her horrific work, dirt still in her hands, completely oblivious to the fact that she was now facing one of the most dangerous men alive. Who do you think you are? She snarled, her voice hoarse from screaming. I'm teaching this little brat a lesson about respect. This is my neighborhood and I make the rules here. Jake's response was swift and terrifying. He moved with the deadly precision that had made him a legend among his fellow SEALs. In exactly 3 seconds he had incapacitated Margaret's 2 cronies with moves that left them unconscious on the ground, and was pulling Emma from her dirt prison with hands that shook with barely controlled rage. His hands, the same hands that had eliminated high-value targets in foreign lands and completed missions that would never see the light of day, now gently brushed soil from our daughter's terrified face with infinite tenderness. Daddy? Emma gasped, her voice weak but filled with relief. She clung to him with desperate strength, her small body shaking uncontrollably. I'm here, baby girl. Daddy's here. You're safe now, Jake whispered, his voice breaking with emotion as he held her against his chest. I'm never leaving you again. Never. Margaret, still completely oblivious to the magnitude of danger she was in, continued her deranged tirade. You can't treat me like this. I'm calling the police. I'll have you arrested. I have connections. I have authority. Do you know who I am? Jake carefully handed Emma to me, his movements controlled but his eyes never leaving Margaret's face. My daughter buried her face in my shoulder, still clutching Mr. Hopscotch, who was now covered in dirt from their ordeal together. The transformation in Jake was terrifying to witness. The gentle father and loving husband disappeared completely, replaced by the Navy SEAL who had survived missions that would have broken lesser men. His posture changed, his breathing changed, even the way he held his hands changed. This was a predator assessing its prey. Ma'am, Jake's voice was eerily calm, each word precisely enunciated. You just buried my 5-year-old daughter alive. You terrorized my wife. You nearly killed my child. You committed attempted murder in front of dozens of witnesses. Something in his tone must have finally penetrated Margaret's rage-induced madness, because she took a step back. But her arrogance was too deeply ingrained to let her retreat completely. I don't care who you think you are. I have rights. I have authority in this neighborhood. Your wife was disrespectful, and your daughter was destroying property. The crowd that had gathered was growing larger, and everyone could feel the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. Several people were still filming, knowing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. Jake pulled out his military ID with movements so controlled they were almost robotic, and held it inches from Margaret's face. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every mission he had completed, every life he had saved, every sacrifice he had made for his country. Chief Petty Officer Jake Mitchell, United States Navy SEALs, Team 6. Combat veteran with 4 deployments. And lady, you just made the biggest mistake of your miserable life. The color drained from Margaret's face so quickly I thought she might faint. The weight of her actions hit her like a freight train. She had just attacked the family of one of the most dangerous and respected men in the military. Her hands, still dirty from trying to bury a child alive, began to shake uncontrollably. I didn't know. She was being disrespectful. Margaret's voice had lost all its earlier venom, replaced by something that might have been the first stirrings of fear. You were just what? Jake's voice remained controlled, but everyone present could feel the barely contained fury radiating from him like heat from a forge. Trying to murder a 5-year-old child? Traumatizing a military family? Committing felony assault in broad daylight. By now, the real police had arrived in force, 3 patrol cars and an ambulance. The paramedics were immediately checking Emma, who clung to me while they examined her for injuries. The whole incident had been recorded by multiple neighbors from different angles, and the footage was already starting to spread on social media. Detective Rodriguez, a veteran officer who had seen it all in 20 years on the force, approached Jake with obvious respect. He had clearly been briefed on who Jake was during the drive over. Sir, we have everything on video from multiple angles. Mrs. Thornfield will be charged with child endangerment, assault, attempted murder, and several other charges. The district attorney is already being briefed. Margaret was handcuffed and led away, still screaming about her rights and how this was all unfair. The woman who had terrorized our neighborhood for years, who had made children afraid to play in their own yards, was finally facing consequences for her actions. But as she was pushed into the police car, she turned back with a look of pure hatred. This isn't over, she screamed. I have money. I have lawyers. I'll destroy all of you. Jake's smile was colder than Arctic wind. Ma'am, you have no idea what you've started. But Jake wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, Jake unleashed the full weight of his military connections and legal knowledge. Margaret discovered that attacking a military family came with federal implications she had never imagined. Jake had served with men who were now in positions of power throughout the government, and every single one of them was outraged by what had happened to Emma. The FBI got involved when they learned that Margaret had threatened a military family. The military advocacy groups rallied around us, providing legal support and ensuring that Margaret would face the maximum penalties under both state and federal law. Jake's former commanding officer, now a Pentagon official, personally called the district attorney to make sure the case received priority treatment. Margaret's high-powered lawyers, who had initially been confident they could get her off with a slap on the wrist, quickly realized they were in over their heads. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was a federal case involving the attempted murder of a military dependent. The video footage went viral within hours, garnering millions of views across all social media platforms. Margaret became known as Psycho HOA Karen across the internet, with her face plastered on news websites around the world. The story was picked up by major news networks, military publications, and even international media outlets. Margaret lost her position as HOA president immediately, voted out unanimously by a board that was horrified by her actions. The HOA not only removed her but also issued a formal apology to our family and established new policies to prevent such abuse of power in the future. Her husband Richard, a respected businessman who had been married to her for 30 years, was so ashamed and disgusted by her actions that he filed for divorce and moved out of their mansion. Their adult children, who had already been estranged from their mother, publicly disowned her and expressed their support for our family. Margaret's reputation in the business community was destroyed overnight. She lost her position on several charity boards, her membership at the country club was revoked, and former friends crossed the street to avoid her. The woman who had once wielded power like a weapon found herself completely powerless and utterly alone. But the most beautiful revenge came from an unexpected source. Emma, despite the trauma, showed the resilience that reminded me exactly why Jake fought so hard to protect innocence. During Margaret's court hearing, my brave little girl asked if she could speak to the judge. "Your Honor," Emma said in her tiny voice, standing on a box so she could reach the microphone, "the mean lady tried to bury me, but my daddy saved me. My daddy protects people because that's what heroes do. I forgive the mean lady because my mommy taught me that forgiveness makes your heart bigger. But I hope she learns to be nice to children." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the hardened judge wiped away tears. Margaret broke down completely, finally understanding the magnitude of what she had done. She had tried to bury an angel, a child so pure that even after being terrorized, she offered forgiveness. The judge sentenced Margaret to 2 years in prison, 5 years probation, mandatory anger management, and 500 hours of community service working with children's charities. She was also required to pay for Emma's therapy and our legal costs. But the real transformation came later. After serving her time, Margaret approached us at Emma's 7th birthday party. She looked different, humbled, broken, but somehow more human. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said quietly to Jake and me. "But I needed you to know that your daughter's words changed my life. I've spent 2 years thinking about what I did and I can't believe I was that monster." Emma, now a confident 7-year-old, looked up at the woman who had once terrorized her. "It's okay, Mrs. Margaret. Daddy taught me that people can change if they really want to." Margaret knelt down to Emma's level. "You are the most beautiful soul I've ever met. I'm so sorry for hurting you. I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure no child ever gets hurt like I hurt you." And she kept that promise. Margaret became a volunteer at children's hospitals, an advocate for anti-bullying programs, and eventually started a foundation for military families. She never forgot the lesson a 5-year-old taught her about forgiveness and grace. Jake retired from the SEALs shortly after the incident, deciding that his most important mission was being present for his family. He became a counselor for veterans and their families, helping others navigate the challenges of military life. Emma grew up strong and confident, never letting that terrible day define her. She kept Mr. Hopscotch as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and courage can triumph. Our quiet suburban street became more than just a neighborhood after that day. It became a community that looked out for each other, where children played safely, and where everyone remembered that kindness is always stronger than cruelty. Sometimes, when I watch Emma playing in our garden, the same spot where she almost lost her life, I'm reminded that heroes come in all sizes. My husband, the Navy SEAL, saved her body that day, but my daughter's forgiving heart saved all our souls. The whole Margaret tried to bury Emma and was filled with beautiful flowers now. Emma planted them herself, saying they were hope flowers, because they grew from a scary place but made something beautiful. Just like forgiveness. Just like second chances. Just like the love that binds a family together, stronger than any force on earth. In the end, Margaret learned that when you mess with a military family, you don't just face one soldier. You face an entire brotherhood. But more importantly, she learned that the most powerful force in the universe isn't weapons or authority. It's the pure heart of a child who chooses love over hatred, even after facing her darkest moment. And that lesson changed everyone who witnessed it, proving that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful messages. Emma kept her promise to plant flowers for Daddy. And in doing so, she planted seeds of forgiveness that bloomed into something beautiful for an entire community. That's the real power of innocence. That's the real strength of a military family. And that's why my daughter will always be my greatest hero.